Marry a complete stranger in a week or lose everything you bled for. That was the choice they handed Ethan Hale. No discussion, no sympathy. Just a judge's order and a woman he'd never seen before on his porch, carrying a single suitcase and holding a look that made no apologies. They called her a spinster, a problem to be solved. But Clara Whitfield didn't ride all the way to Iron Creek Ranch to be saved. She came to earn her place. And before that first week was over, Ethan would learn the real danger to his guarded heart wasn't the law or the land. It was her. If you want to hear how a marriage of convenience became a legendary love story, stick with me. This story teaches us one powerful truth. The thing we fear most, needing someone, is often the very thing that makes us strongest. If you've ever felt like you had to do everything alone, if you've ever been afraid to let someone in because everyone before them let you down, if you've ever wondered whether real partnership is even possible after life has knocked you around, this story is for you. Clara and Ethan prove that it's never too late to find your person. That being too old or too independent or too damaged are just lies the world tells us to keep us small. The bravest thing we can ever do is choose to love someone anyway, even when we're terrified. Hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It all started with a man who figured he needed nobody, and the woman who would prove him terribly wrong. The Arizona sun beat down on the Iron Creek Ranch, hot and unforgiving. Ethan Hale stood on his porch, watching a dust cloud get closer. 3 riders. He knew the lead horse belonged to Judge Horace Peaton, a man who carried more weight in this territory than anyone. The judge always meant trouble. Ethan's jaw set hard. At 28 years old, he was tough and weathered from 6 years of taming this harsh land. His hands were scarred and his eyes looked like a coming storm. He had learned the hard way that depending on other people was a quick path to ruin. The riders stopped, kicking up gravel. Judge Peaton got off his horse slowly, a man more used to a desk than a saddle. He was a broad man in his 50s with graying sideburns and sharp eyes. "Ethan," the judge said, skipping the small talk, "we have to talk." Ethan didn't budge from the porch. "I didn't know I had business with the court, Judge." "You do now." Peaton pointed to his clerk, a nervous young fella named Timothy, and a marshal. "Can we come inside? This is about the legal title to your ranch." Every muscle in Ethan's body tensed up. The ranch. It was always about the ranch. He had filed the claim by the book and worked the land for 6 straight years. But out here, the law could change with the wind. "Say what you need to say," Ethan said, still blocking the door. The judge's face hardened. "Fine. The territorial government has new rules for land claims over 500 acres. To prove you are serious about settling, you have to establish a family household." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "I live here. This is my permanent home." "A family household, Mr. Hale. The law means you need a wife with the intent to start a family." Peaton pulled a paper from his coat. "You have 30 days to get married. If you don't, you forfeit your claim. The land goes up for auction." The words felt like a punch to the gut. 30 days. Get married or lose it all. "That's crazy," Ethan said, his voice low and tight. "I have 6 years of my life in this place. I built it all." "The law says otherwise," the judge replied, his tone firm. "Look, I didn't write the rule. I just have to enforce it. And I think it's a fool idea made up by politicians who've never done a hard day's work. But it is the law." "So find a wife," the marshal added with a shrug. "Plenty of women would be happy to have a place like this." Ethan gave a harsh, humorless laugh. "I am not marrying some woman I don't know just to check a box on a piece of paper." "Then you'll lose the ranch," the judge said simply, putting the paper away. "I am sorry, Ethan, but that's the choice." The 3 men got on their horses. As they were about to ride off, the young clerk, Timothy, spoke up nervously. Sir, there might be another way, Mr. Hale." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What way?" Timothy looked at the judge, who gave a slight nod. A woman arrived on yesterday's stagecoach from Philadelphia. Her name is Clara Whitfield. She's 26, single, and looking for a new life. She's at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. Why would a woman from back east come out here by herself? Ethan asked, suspicious. Her business is her own, the judge cut in. But Timothy is right. She could be a solution for you. If you're interested, I wouldn't waste time. Word travels fast. And with that, they left, leaving Ethan with an impossible choice. He stood there for a long time, just looking at the land he had poured his soul into. It was 640 acres of high desert that he had made his own. He came here at 22, running from a past that taught him people always leave and love was just a word for weakness. His father lost everything chasing empty dreams. His mother died young, worn out from a hard life. By 16, Ethan was on his own, learning that the only thing you could truly count on was yourself. This ranch was the one thing he thought could never be taken from him. Now, they were trying to take it, unless he married a stranger. The sun was going down, but Ethan didn't notice the beautiful colors in the sky. He went inside and poured a stiff whiskey. Marriage. The idea felt foreign and wrong. It meant trust, and depending on someone, all the things that had failed his family. Being alone was safer, but being alone now meant losing everything. He downed the whiskey in one go. He had made his decision. Tomorrow he would ride to town. He would meet this Clara Whitfield, and he would make a deal to save his land. It was just a business arrangement. It did not have to be real love. The town of Copper Springs was little more than a single dusty street. Ethan rode in early to avoid the town gossip. He tied his horse in front of Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. Mrs. Henderson, a sturdy woman in her 50s, answered the door. "Ethan Hale," she said, her eyes sharp. "I heard the judge came to see you." Bad news always traveled fast. "I'm here to see Clara Whitfield," Ethan said, getting straight to the point. "If she's seeing visitors." Mrs. Henderson looked him over, then gave a nod. "Wait here." She went back inside, leaving Ethan on the porch. He took off his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. The man in the window's reflection looked tired and older than his years. "Mr. Hale." He turned. The woman in the doorway was not at all what he expected. Clara Whitfield was tall, nearly 5'8", and slender but strong. Her dark brown hair was tied back simply, and her eyes were a strange gray-green, the color of sage after a rainstorm. She wore a plain dark blue dress that was well made but not fancy. Have you ever faced a problem so big it felt like the whole world was against you? That was Ethan Hale's life. He was about to lose his ranch, his entire world, because of some unfair new law. His only hope was a woman he'd never met, an outsider who was just as cornered as he was. This is a story about how two lonely people, thrown together by desperation, can find something more real than they ever imagined. It reminds us that sometimes the best partnerships come from the most unexpected places. She had a quiet stillness about her, the kind that came from knowing her own mind. She wasn't a classic beauty, but her face had a strength to it. "Miss Whitfield," he said, suddenly feeling rough and dusty. "I'm Ethan Hale. My ranch is about 8 miles west of here. I was hoping for a private word." "I know who you are, Mr. Hale," she replied. Her voice was clear and educated. "Mrs. Henderson mentioned you might stop by. We can talk in the parlor." She led him into a small, proper room. They sat in silence for a moment before Ethan spoke. "I suppose you know about the new settlement law?" "I do," Clara said, her hands folded in her lap. "Then you know I need to find a wife in less than 30 days, or I lose my land. I'll be blunt, ma'am. I'm not offering romance. I need a legal marriage to satisfy the law." "I see," was all she said. "And what would I get out of this arrangement?" The direct question caught him off guard. He figured most women would be grateful for the offer of a home. "Security," he answered. "A roof over your head. The ranch house is big enough for you to have your own space if you'd like." He paused, wanting to be clear. I'm not expecting a real marriage, Miss Whitfield. This would be a business deal. Business deals have clear terms, Clara stated plainly. What are you offering, and what do you expect from me? Ethan hadn't really thought it through that far. I'm offering you a home and financial safety. In return, I need you to marry me and live at the ranch long enough to satisfy the law. And after that, she pressed, you would just, what, annul the marriage? Mr. Hale, I did not travel all the way from Philadelphia to be a temporary solution to your problem. Then why did you come here? He asked, his tone a little sharper than he intended. Clara looked him straight in the eye. I came because I have nothing left for me back east. I am a burden to my relatives. At 26, I'm considered too old for a good marriage, too educated for most work, and too poor to be independent. I came to the Arizona territory hoping that out here, a woman's worth isn't just measured by her marital status. Her honesty was like a punch to the gut. He'd expected excuses, not the plain, hard truth. It doesn't matter out here, he said softly. Folks care if you can work, not who you're married to. Then we have that in common, Mr. Hale, Clara said. I can work. I can manage books, cook, garden, and handle paperwork. What I won't do is be treated like a piece of furniture you needed to fill a room. Ethan leaned back, seeing her in a new light. This woman wasn't desperate. She had pride. He thought this would be a simple transaction, but she was making it complicated. All right, he said. What do you want? Honesty, she replied. I want to know that I won't be treated like a hired hand. And I want the option to leave with enough money to start over if this arrangement doesn't work out. You're negotiating like this is a cattle deal. Isn't that what this is? She countered. He couldn't argue with her logic. Fair enough. Come out to the ranch for 1 week, no strings attached. See the place, see if you can stand me. If you decide to stay, we'll get married. If not, I'll pay your way to wherever you want to go next. Clara thought for a moment, then nodded. 1 week. But I have conditions. Name them. First, separate bedrooms, as you offered. Second, I want to see the ranch's financial books. If my name is on the deed, I need to know what I'm getting into. And third, I will be a partner, not a servant. Each point was fair, but it meant giving up control. Something Ethan hadn't done in 6 long years. Still, he was out of options. Done, he said, standing and holding out his hand. I'll be here with a wagon at sunup. Clara stood and shook his hand. Her grip was firm. Tomorrow then, Mr. Hale. On the long ride home, Ethan felt a strange unease. He had wanted a simple fix to his problem, but Clara Whitfield was anything but simple. She looked him square in the eye and demanded to be treated as an equal. He had a feeling he'd just signed up for a lot more than he bargained for. Clara was ready the next morning with 2 bags and a small trunk full of books. She was dressed for work in a practical skirt and a simple shirt, her hair tied back. The ride to the ranch took over an hour. Ethan pointed out a few landmarks: the deep part of the creek, the ridge where cougars sometimes roamed, the posts that marked his land. Clara just listened, taking it all in. When the ranch finally came into view, Ethan watched her for a reaction. The house was solid and simple, protected by a small hill. The barn and corrals stood behind it. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. He'd built it with his own 2 hands. 640 acres, he said with a hint of pride. 300 head of cattle, 20 horses. The house has 4 rooms. The well never runs dry. It is larger than I expected, Clara said, and more isolated. Nearest neighbor is 5 miles south. Is that a problem for you? No, she said, turning to face him. I'm used to being alone, Mr. Hale. He helped her down from the wagon and showed her inside. The main room was plain, with a big stone fireplace and a long table. The kitchen was clean but bare, with just the essentials on the shelves. It was clearly a place where a man lived alone, focused on work, not comfort. This room is mine, Ethan said, pointing to one door. That one will be yours. He brought in her trunk and left her to look around. When he came back, he found her in the kitchen, studying the nearly empty shelves. She didn't even turn around when she spoke. "Mr. Hale," she asked, "when was the last time you ate a real meal?" For 6 years, this kitchen had seen a man living on his own. Clara looked around at the proof. "Ethan, when's the last time you ate a fresh vegetable? Or real bread? Anything that didn't come out of a can or a salt sack?" "I am not starving," he said, his voice tight. "No," she agreed, setting down her things. "But you are not exactly thriving. If I am staying for a week, I need to get proper supplies from town." He started to protest, but she cut him off. "I need to. This is about seeing if I can live here, not just how you have been getting by. Unless you want beans and hardtack for 7 days straight." Ethan shut his mouth. What did it matter? It was her trial week. "Fine. Make a list. We will go tomorrow." "Today would be better," she replied, not missing a beat. He really had no good reason to put it off. So just 3 hours after arriving, he found himself heading right back to town, a neatly written list from Clara in his pocket. At the store, she was all business, gathering flour, sugar, eggs, potatoes, and a dozen other things he had not bought in years. The store owner, Mr. Jacobson, watched them with a knowing smile. "This is going to cost a pretty penny," Ethan muttered. "I am aware," Clara said, her voice steady. "Food is an investment. A man with a full belly works better." Jacobson grinned. "She has got you there, Hale. A woman's touch might be just what this ranch needs." Ethan paid up and they headed home. That night, Clara took over his kitchen. From his table, he pretended to look over his books, but he was really watching her. She moved with a quiet confidence that was something to see. An hour later, a plate was set in front of him. Roasted chicken, real mashed potatoes, and bread so fresh it was still warm. He had not eaten a meal like this since he left Texas 10 years ago. It was the best thing he had tasted in a long, long time. When he finished, he just said, "Thank you." Clara simply nodded from across the table. After she cleaned up, she wished him a good night and went to her room. Ethan sat alone in the quiet. The house felt different, fuller. It made no sense, but the smell of baked bread and the clean kitchen told a different story. For the first time in 6 years, his house felt like a home, and that rattled him more than he cared to admit. The next few days fell into a rhythm. He would do his ranch work, and she would tend to the house. She scrubbed the place clean, finding dirt he had stopped seeing years ago. She organized his chaotic kitchen. Then, on the 4th day, she started working the old garden plot out back, a patch of ground he had given up on. He watched her from a distance, this woman from back east, working the tough Arizona soil without a single complaint. She did not mind the heat or the loneliness. She just worked. That evening, he walked in to find her looking over his account books. "Did I say you could go through those?" he asked, his tone sharper than he meant it to be. Clara looked up, calm as ever. "You said I could see the financial records." "I meant I would show them to you," he clarified. "Well, you should have said so. Your bookkeeping, by the way, is a real mess." She pointed to a page. "You are mixing your personal money with the ranch's, and you are not tracking anything right. It looks like you have been underpaying yourself on cattle sales, and I think someone is stealing from you." She pointed again. "See here? You bought 200 pounds of feed, but your notes say you only used 120. Where did the other 80 pounds go?" He leaned in, frowning. He had never noticed. "Or here," she said, tapping another spot. "Same thing with salt licks and horse medicine. It is small amounts, but over 6 months you are out $60 to $80. That is either carelessness or theft. $80. That was a month's wages for a ranch hand." "You figured all that out this afternoon?" he asked, surprised. "It is just simple math once the numbers are organized," she said plainly. "You are good with the ranch, Mr. Hale, but you are not so good with the business side of it. It is costing you." He was not offended. He was impressed. He pulled up a chair. "Show me." For the next 2 hours, Clara showed him how to set up his books properly. She explained it all clearly, without making him feel foolish. "You will need to keep this up," she said, closing the book. "An hour a week will save you a lot of money." "Will you teach me?" The words were out before he could stop them. Clara looked him square in the eye. "That depends on if I am still here after this week is over." "Right. The trial. 3 days left." "What do you think so far?" he asked. She looked around the clean, organized room. "I think," she said, "you have built something worth saving. I also think you are more capable than you believe." "But?" he asked, hearing it in her voice. "But I am not sure if you truly want a partner, Mr. Hale, or just a legal convenience. There is a big difference." He knew she was right. He had been looking for a simple solution, but this woman was changing everything. He was not sure if he liked it or if he resented it. "I do not know either," he admitted. "I have been on my own for a long time." "So have I," she said. "But being alone because you choose it is different from being alone because you are afraid of what it means to depend on someone." "And which one am I?" he asked. "I think you are afraid," she said softly. "I think you learned somewhere along the way that trusting people leads to getting hurt. So you built this fortress out here and have been guarding it ever since." Her words hit him hard. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "I'm going to check on the horses," he mumbled, and walked out into the cool night air before she could say another word. A storm was brewing in his chest because he knew she was right. His whole life had taught him that relying on people was a fool's game. After wrestling with those old ghosts for an hour, he finally went inside. On the 5th day, Clara asked to see the cattle. Ethan saddled a steady mare for her, but she mounted the horse with an ease that surprised him. "I spent summers on my grandfather's farm," she explained. "Been riding since I was 6. They rode to the south pasture where the herd of longhorns and Herefords grazed. For a long while, Clara just watched them in silence. "You are short about 15 head, she said suddenly. Ethan's head snapped around. "What?" "By my count, there are 283 cattle. You told me you had 300. He was stunned. "You counted them?" "I estimated," she said. "I could be off by a few, but not by 17. His jaw tightened as he scanned the herd. His spring count had been right on the money, which meant she was right. "Rustlers," he said grimly. They rode the fence line for the next hour until Clara spotted it. A section of wire had been cut clean through and then patched. "Someone was here," she said, dismounting for a closer look. "And recently." Ethan got down beside her, a slow anger building inside him. "It might be someone who knows your routines," Clara suggested, still studying the wire. "You think it is someone I know?" he asked. "I think it is worth considering," she replied, meeting his eyes. He wanted to say no, but he just hired whoever was available for roundup. He had never suspected anyone, but he had never looked for a reason to. "I do not know," he admitted. They repaired the fence and rode back in a heavy quiet. That night, Clara laid out a new system for tracking the livestock and checking fences on a random schedule. "If there is a pattern to the stealing, this will help us find it," she explained. "Us?" Ethan asked. Clara looked up from her ledger. "If I stay, Mr. Hale, this ranch's problems become my problems. I am not one to sit on the sidelines." Some of the tightness in his chest let go. "2 more days," he said. "Then you decide." "Then we both decide," Clara corrected. "This deal only works if we both choose it." She was right. He had to choose this too, to choose to trust someone. That night, he finally admitted to himself that he did not want her to leave. It was not about the ranch or the law. The house simply felt right with her in it. She saw what his life's work could become, and that terrified him more than any threat of jail time. On the 6th day, he returned from riding the fence line to find her on the porch, with a revolver disassembled on a cloth. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "From a trunk in storage. It is an old Colt Navy." "It is well made," she said, cleaning each part with care. "When was it last maintained?" Years, I reckon. I keep my rifle clean. A rifle is no good in close quarters, she said, reassembling the pistol with practiced hands. If someone comes to the house, I would rather be prepared. He leaned against the porch railing. You know how to use that? My grandfather taught me. After he found a box of cartridges, Clara loaded the weapon, walked 20 yards out, and fired 3 times. All 3 shots hit the fence post in a tight group. Ethan worked to keep the surprise off his face. Your grandfather taught you well. She reloaded the pistol. I may have lived in Philadelphia for the past 8 years, Mr. Hale, but I did not forget what it takes to survive. As the sun bled out across the horizon, Clara finally broke their comfortable quiet. Ethan, I have been thinking about your proposal. His heart gave a lurch, but he kept his voice even. And your terms are not acceptable, she stated plainly. If I am to be your legal wife, I need more than a separate room and a look at the books. I require a true partnership in this ranch. My name must be on the deed as a co-owner, not a dependent. I also need assurance that I will not be thrown off this land if something happens to you. Every word was a reasonable demand, but it meant giving up a piece of his control. That is a whole lot to ask, he said slowly. It is a lot to give, she returned. I would be tying my entire future to this place and to you. I believe partnership and security are a fair price for that. If you say no, I will take the stagecoach fare and be gone in the morning. You will have 23 days left to find another wife. And if I say yes, he asked. Then we file the paperwork tomorrow and we get married on the 30th day just as the law requires, she answered, turning to face him. But understand this, Ethan. I will not be a wife in name only. A bit of color rose in her cheeks. This is not about demanding a husband's rights in the bedroom. It is about mutual respect and shared decisions. This ranch must belong to both of us. Ethan stared out at the land he had carved out of dust and grit, all by himself. He had built it to prove he did not need anyone. Now he saw that the greatest threat to his world was not the law or cattle thieves. It was his own stubborn pride, his refusal to admit he could not do everything alone. I need to think on it, he said, his voice rough. Clara nodded. Take the night. I have my own decision to make as well, Mr. Hale. I need to decide if you are a man capable of a true partnership, or if you're just looking for a legal convenience. With that, she went inside, leaving him alone with the fading light. It was hours later, long after dark, that Ethan finally wrestled his pride to the ground. He walked to her door and knocked. When he entered, she was sitting up in bed, still dressed, a book resting in her lap. She had been waiting for him. Yes, he said simply. I agree to all of it. The partnership, the shared ownership, everything. But I have one condition. Clara set her book down. What is the condition? That you give me time, Ethan said, the words feeling foreign. Time to learn how to not be alone. I'm going to be bad at it. I will want to make all the decisions and keep you at a distance because that is all I have ever known. But I will try to be a real partner. I just need you to be patient. She watched his face for a long moment. Then a real smile spread across her lips, transforming her. That, she said, is the first truly honest thing you have said to me since I arrived. All right, Ethan, Clara said, her voice steady as a rock. You give me time to learn this ranch, and I'll give you time to learn me. Ethan nodded, the decision settling in his gut. We'll ride into town tomorrow, make it official. That gives us 23 days till the wedding, she reminded him. Time to be sure. I'm sure, Ethan said, and was surprised to find he meant it. This woman had somehow breached the walls he'd built around his life, and now he wanted to help her tear them down. He held out his hand. She took it, her grip firm. Partners, he said. Partners, she agreed. Right then, Ethan Hale started to wonder if his greatest fear, that love meant weakness, was all wrong. Maybe it meant strength. He had 23 days to find out, and a lifetime to prove this forced arrangement could become the truest partnership Iron Creek had ever seen. But first, he had to learn to trust the woman who might save not just his land, but him too. The next morning, they rode the wagon into Copper Springs. The air was already thick with the day's coming heat. In her bag, Clara carried papers that proved who she was back east, but out here they meant next to nothing. The land office was a stuffy little room that smelled of old dust and dry ink. The clerk, a fella named Morrison, didn't so much as blink. He'd seen all kinds of desperate deals in this territory. "Sign here and here," he mumbled, pushing the deed across the counter. "Miss Whitfield, you understand this makes you a provisional partner today, and a full one on your wedding day?" "I understand," Clara said, her voice clear. "And Mr. Hale," Morrison went on, "you understand you're giving up sole ownership? She'll have an equal say in all matters." Ethan paused for a heartbeat, his hand hovering over the paper. He looked at Clara and saw the same tired hope he felt in his own chest. "I understand." They signed, and just like that, the Iron Creek Ranch belonged to them both. Back out in the blinding sun, Clara tucked her copy of the deed away. "No turning back now," she said softly. "Nope," Ethan agreed. They stopped next at Reverend Calloway's office. He was a lean man in his 40s with kind, knowing eyes. "The 30th of the month," Ethan told him. "Keep it simple." The Reverend made a note. "I've learned that the most practical arrangements can sometimes turn into something more." "We're just aiming for legal and fair," Ethan said flatly. The ride home was quiet. As they reached the stone marker that served as the ranch's boundary, Clara spoke up. "Stop the wagon a minute." Ethan pulled the horses to a halt. Clara climbed down and walked to the pile of stones. She stood there, looking out over the land that was now half hers. "My granddaddy used to say that land remembers," she said, her voice carrying on the wind. "It knows who bled for it. It knows if you're committed." Ethan came and stood beside her. "What do you think this land remembers?" 6 years of one man's grit," she answered without hesitation. "It remembers a man who refused to quit. Now, we'll see if it can remember a partnership." She turned to him then, her gaze direct. "I meant what I said, Ethan. I'm going to be new at this." "Me too," he admitted. "Folks have spent 8 years telling me I'm too independent and too opinionated for my own good." "Good," Ethan said, surprising them both. "I don't want those things to disappear. I just want us to make them work together." A small smile touched her lips. "Well then, we're starting from the same place. That's a sight more than most folks get." The days that followed found a new rhythm. Clara moved about the house with a sense of purpose, not as a guest, but as a partner. She made small, smart changes, arranging things for better light or easier work. For his part, Ethan started talking to her before he acted. He would tell her his plans for the day or ask her opinion on supplies. He even brought her out to the stable to look at a lame horse, wanting her fresh eyes on the problem. This business of explaining himself felt strange. For 6 years he'd answered to no one. But Clara never used her new power as a weapon. She asked, she suggested, and she listened. When they disagreed, she would state her case plainly, and they would work their way to a solution. Their first real fight came 3 days after they filed the deed. Ethan had gone and hired 2 seasonal hands for a fence repair job without telling her. They were drifters he'd used before, and he'd already sent word for them to show up on Monday. Clara found out that night while going through the account books. "You hired Tom Fletcher and Jim Dawson," she said. Her voice was level, but there was a new edge to it. "Yep, good men. We need the help." "Tom Fletcher worked the roundup last spring," she stated. "That's right." Clara slid the inventory log she'd organized across the table, her finger pointing to a specific line. "He was here from March 15th to April 20th, and during that exact time, feed, salt licks, and medicine started to go missing." The argument started over the supply ledgers. "The numbers are still off," Clara stated, her finger tracing a column. "The same shortages I pointed out last week." It is something to consider before you hire Tom Fletcher again. Ethan's jaw went tight. You are saying Tom is a thief? I'm saying the timing is suspicious. Tom has worked for me for 3 seasons, Ethan snapped. He has never given me a single reason to doubt him. That is because you were not watching the inventory close enough to notice $80 in supplies vanish over 6 months, she replied. The truth of her words stung. He pushed his chair back and stood up, the sound loud in the quiet kitchen. I have run this ranch successfully for 6 years without your help. Clara also stood, her gaze unwavering. This ranch belongs to both of us now. That means his hiring affects me. If Tom Fletcher is stealing, he is stealing from my pocket too. I have a right to voice my concern. Voicing a concern is one thing. Vetoing my decision is another. I am not vetoing anything, she said. I am asking you to investigate before you bring a thief onto our property. Our property, Ethan repeated, the word tasting bitter. You have been a co-owner for 5 days and you are already trying to run things. Do not make this about control when it is about common sense, she warned, her expression hardening. If you want to ignore the proof in your own records, that is your choice. But do not pretend I am being unreasonable. She picked up the ledger and walked to her room, closing the door with a quiet click that felt worse than a slam. Ethan stood there, shame and anger churning inside him. She was right. He knew it. His pride was getting in the way. His fear that if he admitted she was right about this, he would have to admit she was right about everything else, until nothing was his alone. He slept poorly, bothered by the silence from her room. In the morning, she was already up and had made coffee, but no breakfast. The chill between them was thick as winter ice. I'm riding out to check the south pasture fence, Ethan announced stiffly. I will come with you, Clara said, already standing. Her tone made it clear it was not a request. They rode in a heavy silence. The sky was gray with the promise of rain. He focused on the fence, trying to ignore her presence beside him. It was Clara who saw it first. Here, she called out, swinging down from her horse. It was another section of fence that had been cleanly cut and then poorly repaired. Fresh tracks showed where several head of cattle had been pushed through. The trail led southeast, toward the rough country where stolen livestock could easily disappear. At least 10 head, Ethan said, his voice grim. Maybe more, Clara added, studying the hoofprints. 2 riders, maybe 3. Happened in the last day or so. A cold rage settled in Ethan's gut. This was not random. This was a targeted attack by someone who knew his routines. We have to track them, he said. No, Ethan, she countered firmly. We need to report this. This is a job for the territorial marshal, not for us alone. By the time the marshal gets here, they will be long gone, Ethan argued. And if we track them alone, they might shoot us, Clara said plainly. Charging after armed thieves with no backup is how people get killed. He hated that she was right again. Fine, he said. We will ride to town and report it. Clara nodded. But on the way, Ethan turned his horse toward the old line shack on the east edge of the property. Just checking something, he said. Inside, it was clear someone had been there. A good knife, 2 coils of rope, and a set of wire cutters were missing. Someone who knows where you keep things, Clara said, her expression grim. Someone who has been here before. The name Tom Fletcher immediately came to Ethan's mind. He had worked the spring roundup. He knew the property, the routines, everything, where supplies were kept. Ethan slumped onto the rough bench, the sting of betrayal a heavy weight. You were right, he finally said, about checking on him first. Clara settled beside him. I don't feel good about being right on this one. I hired him 3 times, Ethan said, looking down at his own calloused hands. Paid him a fair wage. I trusted him. And he was stealing from me the whole time. You couldn't have known that. Not without better books. You knew. You saw it in a week. That is because I was looking at numbers, not at a man. Clara's voice was soft. Ethan, being betrayed does not make you a fool for trusting. It just means somebody took advantage of your good nature. That is on them, not you. Her kindness felt like it cracked a rib. He had expected her to be smug, to lord it over him. Instead, she offered comfort. "I am sorry," he said, "for how I acted, for trying to make this about control instead of just listening." "I am sorry too," Clara replied. "I could have been less pushy about it." "You were fine. I was the one being stubborn." Ethan turned to her. "This partnership thing, I am going to keep making mistakes, but I am going to try to do better." Clara's face softened. "We are both going to make mistakes. The real question is if we can forgive each other and learn, or just let it push us apart." "I vote for forgiving and learning." "Agreed." They rode into town to report the theft to Marshal Davies, a weathered man in his 50s who had been the law in this territory for 2 decades. He listened, looked over the busted fence, and promised to get a tracking party together. "Tom Fletcher, you say?" Davies scratched his jaw. "He has been on my mind before. Never could prove nothing, but if he is with a gang, that changes things. I will see what I can find." Back at the ranch that evening, they worked in a comfortable silence. Clara made supper while Ethan updated the logs. Over the meal, they talked about hiring better hands and maybe getting a couple of dogs for security. It felt strange working together like this, but it also felt right. For the first time in 6 years, the weight of it all was not just on his shoulders. Clara was carrying her half, and somehow that made the whole load feel lighter. After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the hills. "My father died when I was 14, Clara said quietly. "My mother remarried a man who did not want me around. I was sent to live with an aunt and uncle who made it plain I was a burden. I learned early on that you cannot always count on family." Ethan just listened, knowing she was giving him a piece of her past, the reason she was so self-reliant. "I worked as a teacher for 6 years," she went on. "I saved everything I could. But my boss made it clear an unmarried woman was not getting anywhere. Then my aunt passed, and my uncle told me it was time to leave. I had a choice. Find a husband, any husband, or take my savings and start fresh somewhere else." "So you came out here," Ethan said. "I came here," she confirmed. "I heard a woman had a better chance in the territory. I never expected to find a husband. I just wanted work, independence, and my own little patch of land someday." She gave a small smile. "I sure did not expect to be a rancher 2 weeks after I arrived. And now that you are, do you regret it?" Clara turned to look at him, her eyes holding the last of the daylight. "Ask me again in a year. Ask me after we have made it through our first winter, our first real trouble. Then I will know if I regret it." "Fair enough," Ethan said. "I will ask you then." The days leading up to the wedding went by fast. Clara got the neglected garden growing again with tough vegetables. Ethan built her a proper chicken coop and brought home 6 hens so they had fresh eggs. They reorganized the barn together, making the daily chores run smoother. Marshal Davies came back 5 days later with news. He had tracked the rustlers and got back 9 of the stolen cattle, but the thieves themselves had scattered. Tom Fletcher was gone from the territory, which was as good as a confession. "We will keep an eye out," Davies promised. "If he ever shows his face here again, we will get him. You ought to hire more reliable help." Finding that help was not easy. Word of the wedding had spread through Copper Springs, and the talk about Clara made Ethan's jaw tight. He heard men in the saloon talking nonsense about why an Eastern woman would marry a rancher she hardly knew, making crude jokes about the whole deal. He never paid much mind to town gossip before, but hearing it now made him angry. Clara deserved better than to be talked about like some spinster who had trapped him. The anger must have been clear on his face. Clara had come to town with him for fabric. She took one look at him, heard the voices from the saloon, and guided him right out of the general store. "Let it go," she said as they loaded the wagon. "They are insulting you. It is just gossip. That is what folks do in small towns. It does not matter what they think. It matters to me." Clara stopped and looked at him, her expression hard to read. Why? The question took him by surprise. Why did it matter? They were not really married, not yet. He did not know if this would even last. The gossip should not bother him, but it did. Because somewhere in the last 2 weeks, Clara had become more than just a solution to a problem. She had become someone he respected, someone he valued. and hearing people belittle her felt like a personal insult. "Because you deserve respect," he said. And the words felt truer than anything he had said in a long time. Ethan finally broke the silence. "Because what we are building right here is worth a whole lot more than their small-minded gossip." Clara's expression softened. "I appreciate you saying that. But Ethan, you cannot fight every person who misunderstands us. We know the truth, and that has to be enough." He knew she was right, but the anger did not just disappear. The ride home was quiet, filled with the Reverend's words about practical arrangements sometimes becoming something more. They were partners by day and strangers by night, sharing everything but true closeness. Ethan wondered how long that could last. Just a week before their wedding, the summer storms hit hard. Thunder rattled the desert and rain came down in sheets, turning dust to thick mud. Ethan spent 2 days in the downpour, making sure the livestock did not get caught in flash floods. At the house, Clara fought a leaky roof in the kitchen. When he finally came inside, soaked and worn out, she had dry clothes and hot coffee ready. "The leak is right over the stove," she told him. "I put a temporary patch on it, but it will need a proper fix when this weather clears." After changing, he found his wet clothes already hanging by the fire to dry. She had laid out clean socks for him without a word. These small, thoughtful acts were breaking down his walls faster than any grand gesture ever could. "You do not have to do all this," he said, waving a hand at her quiet efficiency. "I know," she answered, not looking up from the stew. "We are partners. You spent 2 days in the rain protecting our cattle. The least I can do is make sure you do not get sick." "Our cattle," Ethan repeated quietly. The words felt a little less strange this time. That night, the storm grew even worse. The wind howled and threw rain against the windows so hard the glass shook. Unable to sleep, Ethan was startled by a soft knock on his door. It was Clara, looking more uncertain than he had ever seen her. "I am sorry to bother you," she said, "but water is coming through my ceiling now. My bedroom is flooding." He was up in an instant, grabbing a lamp. Her room was just as she described, with a steady drip soaking the rug by her bed. "You cannot sleep in here," he said, getting a bucket. "I will take the sofa." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You will sleep in my room. I will take the sofa. It is not up for debate." He began gathering her things, her books, her brush, and led her to his room. "Ethan," she said, stopping him at the door, "thank you for the room, the partnership, for the respect." "You do not need to thank me for that," he told her. This woman, who had walked into his life just 3 weeks ago, had somehow become essential. "You would be surprised how rare basic decency is," she said softly. He closed the door and went to the sofa. It was not comfortable, but as he lay there, he realized something important had changed. Clara was safe in his bed, and instead of feeling trapped, he felt protective. He was glad she was there. The morning was clear and bright. The roof damage was bad. It would take a week of repairs. Clara insisted on coming to town with him for supplies. They spent the morning up on the roof, taking measurements together. She was not afraid of the height and worked beside him as a true partner. As they came down for lunch, he found himself just watching her. "What is it?" she asked, catching his gaze. "Just thinking," he said. "In 4 days, we will be married, and I still barely know you." A small smile touched her lips. "What do you want to know?" "Favorite book?" Her answer was Jane Eyre, a book her uncle had called too radical for a woman. "Because the heroine is independent and has her own opinions," she explained. "I cannot imagine why that would appeal to you," Ethan said with a dry grin. "What about you?" she asked. "I can play the harmonica," he admitted. "Taught myself one winter when I was snowed in for 3 weeks straight." They spent the rest of the meal sharing small pieces of their lives, building a foundation of understanding between them. Have you ever felt so alone that you'd make a deal with a stranger just to survive? That's where Ethan and Clara were, 2 lost souls in the dusty West, bound by a piece of paper that said they were married. But a legal document can't build a home. This is a story about how honesty and courage can turn a desperate bargain into a real partnership. And it might just remind you that the most important promises we make are the ones that come from the heart. The night before the wedding, Ethan found Clara on the porch. The sky was a blaze of orange and gold. He sat with her, and the silence was comfortable. "Are you scared?" Clara finally asked. "About tomorrow, and everything it means." Ethan thought about lying, but their deal was built on honesty. "Yeah," he admitted. "I'm scared I won't be a good enough husband. That you'll wake up in 6 months and realize you made a huge mistake." Clara took his hand. "I'm scared too," she said. "I'm afraid my stubborn independence will just push you away. That this beautiful thing we're trying to build will fall apart because it started as just a legal deal." "So we're both terrified," Ethan said, squeezing her hand. "Good. At least we're terrified together." Clara's laugh cut through the tension in his chest. Tomorrow, they would make their official promises to Reverend Calloway. But sitting there under that big Texas sky, Ethan knew they'd already made the promises that truly mattered. They promised to try, to be honest, and to face each other as equals, no matter how hard it got. The rest was just paperwork. He looked at her and said, "Clara, I am so glad you did not get back on that stagecoach to Philadelphia." She turned, the last of the sunset in her eyes. "So am I." They stayed like that until it was full dark, neither one wanting to let go. And for the first time in 10 long years, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. It was a fragile feeling, but it was real. Hope that maybe he was wrong about having to face the world all by himself. The wedding the next day was over in 15 minutes. It was held in the Reverend's small office, not the church. Mrs. Henderson and the store owner were their witnesses. Clara wore a simple gray dress she had sewn herself. Ethan wore his only suit, smelling faintly of the cedar chest where he kept it. The words were standard, but when Ethan took Clara's hand to say his vows, he felt a surprising weight to them. This was more than convenience now. He was choosing her. He was choosing to believe that what they had started in 3 short weeks could last a lifetime. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, there was a clumsy pause. Everyone expected a kiss. Ethan just met Clara's eyes and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back, and it felt more real than any kiss could have. After a small celebration at the boarding house, they rode back to the ranch. "Well," Clara said as they neared their land, "we did it." "We did," Ethan agreed. He looked at his new wife, trying to find the right words. "I guess it should feel different. Does it to you?" He thought for a moment. "No, and yes, we are the same people. But the promises are real now. They are legal and permanent." "Permanent, unless we choose otherwise," Clara corrected him gently. "The marriage gives us safety, but the partnership is what we have to build every single day." Back at the ranch house, everything looked the same, but it all felt different. That night at dinner, the air was thick with things they were not saying. They were husband and wife, sharing a name and a home, but they still slept in separate rooms. "I have been thinking," Clara said, putting her fork down, "about the sleeping arrangements." Ethan's heart began to beat a little faster. "The leak in my old room is fixed now. I should move my things back." She looked straight at him. "Unless you would prefer I did not." The question hung there between them. A normal marriage had certain expectations, but their arrangement was anything but normal. "What would you prefer?" he asked, turning the question back to her. "I asked you first." He set his own fork down. "Clara, I am not going to pressure you. We agreed on respect, and that includes respecting your boundaries." "That is not an answer," she said. He took a deep breath. "The honest answer is, I do not know what I want. Part of me thinks we should keep things simple. Separate rooms, clear rules. But another part of me remembers the night of the storm. Knowing you were safe in my room just felt right, and I cannot explain why." Clara's face softened. "I felt the same way," she admitted. "Safe. And I realized our separate rooms were not about being proper. They were about being afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of getting too close," she said. "Of this becoming more than a deal and not knowing what to do. Ethan, I am not asking to consummate this marriage tonight, but maybe we can stop acting like business partners who just share a house." "What would that look like?" he asked. "I do not know," she said. "Maybe we figure it out together. Maybe we admit that we're both scared of caring too much and we just decide to be brave about it anyway." Ethan looked at her, seeing the strength and the fear she was letting him see. This woman had walked into his life and somehow made him want to open up his world. "I care about you, Clara," he said, his voice quiet. "More than I wanted to. And it scares the hell out of me because everyone I have ever cared for has left me." "I am not going anywhere," she said firmly. "I signed the papers. I planted a garden. This is my home now, too. And I do not abandon what is mine." "You can say that now." "I will always say it," she insisted, reaching for his hand. "I cannot promise we will not hurt each other. People do. But I can promise I will not run away when things get tough. I will fight for what we are building here. Can you promise me the same?" He took her hand. "Yes, I can promise that." "Then let us stop sleeping in separate rooms like we are strangers," she said. "Let us share a bed, even if we only sleep. Let us stop pretending this is just business, because it has not been business for a long time." Ethan felt a wall inside him begin to crumble. "Okay," he said. "Okay." And as they got ready for bed, both nervous and unsure, he walked with her to his room. For the first time, they were not just partners on paper. They were choosing to build a future. Together. Her ribs. "I can still take the other room," she offered quietly. "I do not want you to." He pulled back the covers for her. No pressure, no expectations. Clara got into bed, staying carefully on her side. When Ethan put out the lamp, he was very aware of her just 2 feet away in the darkness. "Ethan," she whispered, "thank you for making me feel safe enough to try this." "Thank you for being brave enough to suggest it," he replied. Soon, her breathing deepened into sleep. He felt himself relax. This was not terrifying at all. It was peaceful. He fell asleep faster than he had in years. The next week found a new rhythm. They worked together, ate together, and went to bed together. Some nights they talked for hours. Other nights they lay in comfortable silence. Slowly, the space between them in the bed grew smaller. One night he woke up to find she had rolled against him in her sleep. He just naturally wrapped an arm around her for warmth and she settled against him. They woke up tangled, not saying a word about it. But the next night, neither of them pretended to keep to their own side of the bed. The ranch kept on. They hired 2 good hands, Miguel and John, on Marshall Davies' word. The 4 of them got the fences mended and the water systems running right. Clara's way with numbers and plans changed everything. She had schedules for pasture rotation and a count of every tool. Soon Ethan was asking her opinion on every big choice. One night she looked up from the books. "You need to hire another hand for the winter," she said. "The work's too heavy for 4 men when the snow flies." "Winter hands are scarce," Ethan replied. "Then we give them a reason to stay," she said. "A warm bunkhouse, good meals, and fair pay. You'd be surprised what a man will do for a little respect." And she was right. By the first snow, they had 5 hands working the ranch. The old bunkhouse was full of life again. But a successful ranch draws eyes. Other folks started talking about a woman running a man's business. Ethan heard the whispers in town, how Clara had him henpecked. He paid it no mind, until he heard Ben Morrison making crude jokes at the saloon. Something inside Ethan just snapped. "You mind saying that again?" His voice went low and cold. Morrison, drunk and mean, turned to face him. I said your wife's got you on a short leash, Hale. A woman comes from back east and takes over a man's ranch. That ain't a partnership. That's a takeover. Ethan's fist met Morrison's jaw before he even thought about it. Morrison hit the floor hard. My wife, Ethan growled, is a better rancher than you'll ever be. You got a problem with that, you keep it to yourself. Marshal Davies stepped in, pulling Ethan back. That's enough, you two. Ethan, you go on home. He rode back with bloody knuckles and a hot temper. Clara was waiting on the porch. One look told her the whole story. What happened? Ben Morrison shared some thoughts about our marriage. I corrected his thinking. Ethan, she sighed, a mix of frustration and fondness in her voice. You can't just punch every man who talks about us. I can surely try, he muttered. She took his hand to inspect the damage. Come on inside. Let's get that cleaned up. In the kitchen, her touch was gentle as she bandaged his hand. I can handle talk, she said softly. I've been doing it my whole life. It matters to me, Ethan said, his voice firm. It matters that they respect you. Clara looked him straight in the eye. Why? Because you're my wife, he said, the words feeling truer than anything he'd ever said. Are we still pretending this is just business, Ethan? The question hung there between them. He thought about the past few months, waking up with her, working beside her, hearing her laugh. The ranch house felt empty whenever she was gone. No, he said, his voice raspy. I reckon we're done pretending. A fierce, tender look came over her face. Good. Because I stopped pretending a long time ago. She leaned in, and he met her halfway. The kiss was slow at first, then deepened into something that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he admitted, the words feeling both scary and right. I don't know how it happened, but it did. I love you too, she whispered back. I think I have since the day you actually listened to my ideas about the ledgers. That night, their marriage, which started as a deal on paper, became something real and true. Later in the dark, he confessed, I was afraid of this, of needing someone so much. This ain't weakness, Ethan, Clara said, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. This is strength. Choosing to trust someone is the bravest thing a person can do. No turning back now, he said, pulling her closer. Would you want to? Her heart beat steady against his. Not for anything in this world. But trouble was brewing. Marshal Davies sent word that Tom Fletcher and his gang were back in the territory pushing stolen cattle south of Iron Creek. We need to tighten up security, Clara said, pointing at a map. More patrols on the fence line, different times each night. That's a hard pace to keep, Ethan said. It won't be for long, she reasoned. Winter will make it harder for them. If we can hold out for a month, they'll move on. They set up the new patrols. It was hard, bone-tiring work, but for 2 weeks, all was quiet. They started to think they were safe. That's when Fletcher made his move. It was a moonless night in the middle of December. Ethan was riding the east fence when he heard it, the sound of cattle being pushed, not grazing. He spurred his horse toward the noise, his rifle ready. In the dark, he saw 3 riders herding a dozen of his cattle toward a break in the fence. He recognized Tom Fletcher's outline against the sky. That's far enough, Ethan yelled, raising his rifle. The answer was a bullet that whizzed past his ear. Ethan hit the dirt using his horse for cover and fired back. The cattle scattered and the riders shot wildly as they retreated into the dark. Back at the house, Clara heard the gunshots and her heart went cold. She grabbed the revolver, her hand steady despite the fear, and ran for the barn. Miguel! John! Gunfire on the east line! Ethan's out there by himself! They saddled their horses in a flash. Clara took the lead, pushing her mare into a reckless gallop through the darkness. She had to get to him. After all this time, she couldn't lose him now. The thought was a rattler in her gut, so she shoved it aside. She spurred her horse on, her only focus on getting to Ethan. They found him trading shots with two men from behind a mess of rocks. A third was trying to sneak up on him through the brush. Clara didn't even think. She drew her pistol, aimed for the dirt right in front of the flanking rider's horse, and fired. The animal screamed and threw its rider. The other two, seeing the tables had turned, took off into the dark. Miguel cut off the man on the ground, his rifle leveled square on his chest. Ethan got to his feet, covered in dust. A graze on his shoulder was bleeding, but he was alive. Clara near fell off her own horse, getting to him, her hands shaking now that the fight was over. "I'm all right," he said, pulling her in close. "Just a scratch." He looked her right in the eye. "What in the world are you doing out here? You should have stayed at the house." Her fear turned to hot anger in a heartbeat. "Safe? While you're getting shot at? Ethan, we're partners. That means I don't sit warm at home while you're out here alone. I can handle—" "I know you can," she cut in, her voice all steel. "But you don't have to. When are you going to get that through your head? You are not alone anymore." Ethan just looked at her. This woman who rode straight into gunfire for him. He felt something deep inside him shift. "You're right," he said, his voice low. "I'm sorry." The fella they caught turned out to be one of Fletcher's crew, a kid hardly 20 years old. He spilled the whole story quick. Fletcher had been hitting ranches all over, using inside help to know just when and where to strike. He'd planned one last raid on Iron Creek before winter set in. But instead, he lost a man and didn't get a single head of cattle. When Marshal Davies showed up at dawn, he told them, "Fletcher will hear his man talked. He'll know this part of the country's too hot for him now. I reckon he'll be gone for good." "Good riddance," Clara said, her arm tight around Ethan's waist. After the marshal left, they just stood there, watching the sun come up over their land. The cattle were found. The fence could be mended. They had made it through. "I thought I was going to lose you," Clara said softly. "When I heard those shots—" "I know," Ethan said, holding her tighter. "I thought the same thing when I saw you riding in. Clara, you could have been killed." "So could you," she said, turning to face him. "And I meant what I said, Ethan. We're partners in all of it, the work, the risk, the whole thing. I can't be the kind of wife who waits by the fire. That's not me." "I'm starting to see that," he admitted. "For so long I figured caring for someone was a weakness, that leaning on somebody was a mistake. But last night, knowing you had my back, that didn't make me weak. It made me stronger." "It made us stronger," Clara corrected him gently. "Yeah," Ethan smiled a little. "It surely did." They walked back to the house, hand in hand. The ranch hands were already up and moving, starting the day's chores, fixing the busted fence. Life just kept on going. That evening, sitting on the porch, Ethan realized something that would have scared him half to death 6 months ago. He'd built Iron Creek into something worth fighting for. But it wasn't the ranch he was defending last night. And it wasn't the ranch that made Clara ride into a gunfight. What they were protecting now was each other. It was the home they'd built, not out of wood and stone, but out of trust. The judge told him to marry or lose it all. He'd married to save his land, but somewhere along the way the land had stopped being the prize. Clara was the prize. "What's on your mind?" Clara asked him. "Just thinking that old judge was right." "About what?" "About what makes a place a home," he said. "He told me I needed to build a family. I thought that just meant signing some papers, putting a wife's name on a piece of land." He took her hand. "But he meant this. He meant finding someone to share the load with, someone who makes it all mean something." Clara's eyes seemed to shine in the twilight. "Are you saying you're glad the law made you marry me?" "I'm saying I thank whatever brought you to my door that day," Ethan said. "The law, your need for a new start, my own stubborn pride. I'm grateful for all of it, because it brought me you. Have you ever gotten everything you ever wanted, only to feel like you were about to lose it all? That's what happened to Ethan. He was a man who built walls around his heart so thick he figured no one could ever get in. Then Clara came along and didn't just knock them down, she convinced him to open the gates himself. This is a story about how love isn't a weakness, but the greatest strength a person can find. It's about learning that the only way to beat the ghosts of your past is to trust someone with your future. So if you've ever felt like your own fear was your worst enemy, stick around. Ethan told Clara she was the best thing that ever happened to him, saying, "You own my heart, Clara Hale, completely and permanently." She smiled against his chest and said, "Good, because you own mine too." They had built a life together, a partnership that looked like it would last forever. But the real victory wasn't the ranch they'd saved. It was that Clara had saved him. Winter came to the Iron Creek Ranch, covering the land in a thick blanket of snow. The cold was bitter, freezing water in the buckets overnight, but Clara knew just what to do. She came from a place with harsh winters and made their home a warm, welcoming haven against the brutal weather. She filled the pantry, canned vegetables, and kept a fire roaring in the hearth. Ethan would watch her, feeling a deep sense of peace he'd never known. She made the long, dark evenings something to look forward to. They would sit together after supper. Sometimes Clara would read to him, and other times they would talk for hours, sharing old memories and making plans for the future. Often they just sat in a comfortable silence, the kind that only happens when two people feel completely at ease with one another. But underneath all that contentment, a deep-seated fear began to grow inside Ethan. The happiness he'd found with Clara was so powerful it scared a wounded part of him, a part that had spent a lifetime learning that love only leads to pain. Every morning he woke up next to her, and every night he fell asleep with her in his arms. The fear got a little bit stronger. He started asking himself, what if she leaves? What if he messes up and loses the only thing that matters? He knew it didn't make sense. Clara had proven her loyalty time and time again. She had stood by him against all odds. But fear isn't logical. The old wounds from his past, from his father's failures and his mother's death, ran too deep. So he started pulling away. He would spend extra hours out on the range, make decisions about the ranch without talking to her, and hold a little piece of himself back just in case. He was building distance, trying to protect himself from a heartbreak he was sure was coming. And Clara, well, she noticed everything. One evening, as snow fell outside the window, she finally said, "You've been quiet lately." Ethan just shrugged. "Just tired," he mumbled, which was only half the truth. Clara closed the account book she was looking at. "Ethan, talk to me. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," he insisted. Her voice was gentle but firm when she replied, "Don't shut me out. We promised we'd be honest with each other." He remembered that promise. That was part of the problem. Promises can be broken. "I don't want to burden you," he said, walking over to the window. He finally confessed, his voice low. "The truth is, I'm terrified, Clara. Terrified I'll wake up one day and all of this will be gone. That you'll realize you deserve better. That I'll fail you and lose you." The words just hung there in the quiet room. Ethan was afraid to turn and see the look on her face. Then Clara spoke, her voice soft with understanding. "So you're pushing me away to protect yourself from something that hasn't even happened." He turned around. Her eyes weren't filled with anger, but with a deep sadness. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, walking right up to him. "I choose you every single day, not because it's easy, but because you are worth it." "People say that until they don't," Ethan said, the old bitterness creeping back into his voice. "Everyone leaves eventually, Clara." "Then let me be the first one who doesn't," she said, taking his hands. "I know you're scared. I am too. But shutting me out doesn't protect you from loss. It just makes sure you'll be alone even when I'm standing right here beside you." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He was so busy trying to avoid future pain that he was causing it right now, in the present. He was choosing to be lonely, because it felt safer than being in love. "I don't know how to stop being afraid," he admitted quietly. "I'm not asking you to stop being afraid," she said, her grip tightening on his hands. "I'm asking you to be afraid, and choose me anyway. Choose us. But I can't be the only one fighting for this marriage while you keep one foot out the door." She was right. He knew she was right. "I'll try," he whispered. "I'll try to do better." For the next few weeks, Ethan fought hard against the fear. Some days were easier than others, but that nagging voice was always there, telling him that this kind of happiness could not possibly last. Then a storm rolled in from the north. Miguel, his most trusted ranch hand, looked at the sky and said, "A bad one's coming, Ethan. The kind that buries everything." It was a storm that would put their promises to the ultimate test. They got ready. For 2 days, they moved the herd into the most sheltered valleys they had. They braced the barn, stocked extra feed, and did everything a rancher does when a bad storm is brewing. Inside, Clara made sure they had enough food and fuel to last for weeks. Ethan watched her check the supplies for a third time and said, "Don't you think this is a bit much?" Clara just looked at him. "It's better to have too much than not enough," she told him. "Miguel is worried, and that man does not scare easy." She was right to listen to him. That Tuesday, the storm came in with a fury that shook even Miguel. The wind howled something fierce, and the snow fell so thick you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. The temperature dropped so low it was dangerous to be outside for even a few seconds. They all gathered in the main house, waiting it out. Miguel and John had been caught out in it, but made it back half frozen. "We did all we could for the herd," Miguel said, his teeth chattering by the fire. "Now we just have to wait." The storm raged for 3 solid days. Snow piled up higher than the windows. That wind never let up, just screamed and screamed until you could barely think straight. On the 4th day, everything went quiet. The silence was almost louder than the storm had been. When Ethan opened the door, the whole world was buried in white. Snowdrifts stood 10, even 12 feet high in some places. "I need to go check on the cattle," he said, "and see what we lost." Clara stood firm. "We need to wait, Ethan. The temperature is still deadly out there, and another storm could be right behind this one." "The cattle can't wait, Clara. If any of them are buried or stranded, we lose more with every hour we sit here." "Then send the hands out in pairs," she pleaded. "Tell them to stay together and be back by dark. You don't have to go yourself." "It's my ranch," he said flatly. "It's my responsibility." "It is our ranch." Clara's voice was sharp with worry. "And going out there alone right now is just plain foolish." But Ethan was already pulling on his heaviest coat, his mind made up. He couldn't stand the thought of sitting warm inside while his livelihood was dying out in the snow. "I'll take Miguel," he offered, but it wasn't the compromise she wanted. "Ethan, please," she said, grabbing his arm. "Just wait one more day. Don't risk it." "It's not a risk," he said. "It's the job. The job can wait." "No, it can't." Ethan pulled his arm away and walked to the door. "I'll be back before dark. Don't you worry." He left without looking back, because he knew he would see the fear in her eyes. He knew she was thinking he was doing exactly what she had accused him of before, pulling away and making decisions on his own. He was choosing the lonely path he knew over the harder work of being a partner. But even knowing that, he still went. This fear he'd been fighting for months had found a target. If he could just focus on the ranch, on the cattle, on problems he knew how to fix, maybe he could ignore the terrifying feeling of needing Clara, of admitting that she had his whole heart. So he and Miguel rode out into that deadly cold. They checked the herd, which had made it through better than he'd figured. They lost a few old-timers and some that had wandered off, but most were all right. "We should head back," Miguel said as the sun started to dip low. "The temperature's dropping again." "Just one more pasture," Ethan insisted. "The north section." "Ethan, it's getting dark and colder by the minute. We need to go now." "You go on ahead. I'll check the north pasture and meet you back at the house." Miguel just looked at him, his frustration finally boiling over. "I'm not leaving you out here alone. We go together, or we stay together." "I don't need a babysitter, Miguel." "No, you need a partner. But you keep pushing yours away. Your wife is back at that house, worried sick, and you're out here risking your neck for cattle that will be here tomorrow. What are you trying to prove?" The question hit Ethan hard. What was he trying to prove? That he didn't need anyone? That depending on Clara was a weakness instead of a strength? Fine, he finally said. We'll head back. But they had waited too long. The cold had set in faster than they thought. By the time they were halfway home, both men were in trouble. Ethan could feel the numbness creeping into his fingers and toes, a sure sign of hypothermia. "Keep moving," Miguel grunted, his own words slurring from the cold. "Don't stop." Ethan tried. He really did, but his body was shutting down. He fell from his horse, then he fell again. The second time, he couldn't find the strength to get back up. "Miguel," he mumbled, his mouth not working right. "Go get help." Miguel was already there, trying to pull him up. "Not leaving you," he said. "We go together, remember?" But Ethan was dead weight. The world was going white and quiet. It would have been so easy to just close his eyes and rest. Then he thought of Clara. He pictured her waiting at the window, choosing him, just like she promised she would. And he thought of all the ways he had failed to choose her back, of all the walls he'd kept up. He was about to freeze to death in a snowdrift, all to check on cattle that could have waited. He was a fool. "Clara," he managed to say. "Tell Clara." But the cold won, and everything went dark. Back at the ranch house, Clara stared out the window into the blackness. The sun had set an hour ago. Ethan and Miguel were still out there. "We have to go find them," she said to the ranch hands. "In this cold? In the dark?" John said gently. "We'll just get lost ourselves. They're smart men. They'll find shelter." "Or they are already dead." Clara's voice was flat. If she let the fear in, it would swallow her whole. "Saddle the horses. Bring lanterns. We are going." They tried to argue, but there was no changing her mind. She was going to find her husband. They rode out into that freezing dark, their lanterns cutting small holes in the night, calling out names the wind stole right from their mouths. It was John who saw Miguel's horse first, wandering with an empty saddle. 100 yards away, they found them. Miguel was barely conscious, but he was alive. Ethan was like a block of ice, still and quiet. But Clara did not fall apart. She gave orders like a general. John would get Miguel back to the house right now. She would stay with Ethan and start warming him up while the others made a sled to carry him back. "You should go back with Miguel," John protested. "We can handle this." "I am not leaving my husband." Her tone made it clear there would be no more discussion. She got off her horse and pulled Ethan close, wrapping her own coat around them both, trying to give him some of her own warmth. She rubbed his frozen hands, talking to him the whole time. "You don't get to die out here, Ethan Hale. Do you hear me? You don't get to run from your fears and leave me alone. We made promises. I need you to fight for us. You fight, you hear me? You fight to come back to me." He was so cold it hurt to touch him. She couldn't rightly tell if he was even breathing. Fear was a wildcat clawing at her throat, but she fought it down. She had to keep working, had to believe he could make it. The men came back with blankets and a sled they'd thrown together. They wrapped Ethan up gentle and started the long, slow drag back to the ranch house. Clara rode right beside him, her eyes never leaving his face, praying for any sign of life. Inside, they got him into the bedroom and out of his frozen clothes. Clara filled the bed with stones she'd heated by the fire, then piled on every blanket in the house. Miguel came in, looking shaky but clear-headed. "How is he even alive?" Clara whispered. It was the only thing she knew for sure. "His heart is still beating." "That's my fault," Miguel said quietly. "I should have made us turn back." "No." Clara's voice was hard as iron. "This is Ethan's fault. He's the one who chose to stay out, to risk it all for a few head of cattle." She sat by the bed, holding his hand, and just waited. The hours passed like cold molasses. His skin finally warmed up some, and his breathing got a little stronger. But he never woke up. The sun came up on a new day. Clara hadn't moved. She hadn't slept, only moving to swap out the heated stones and check the faint beat of his pulse. She was worn out, scared to death, and mad as a hornet all at once. "You promised you would fight for us," she whispered to his still body. "But the very first time choosing me meant you had to trust me. You ran. You chose those cattle over your own life. Now you are here, maybe dying, and I cannot even tell you how angry I am." Her voice cracked on the last few words as tears finally fell. She rested her head on the bed next to him, crying for the fear and the anger and the love that made it all hurt so much. She almost missed it when his hand moved, just barely touching her hair. "Clara." The word was a rough, weak whisper, but it made her head shoot right up. Ethan's eyes were open. "You are awake," she breathed. "Oh, thank heavens. You are awake." "Miguel," he managed to say. "He is fine. Recovered hours ago," she said, her hand tightening on his. "You nearly died, Ethan." "Died. You were so cold for so long. I thought I had lost you." "I am sorry," he said, the words taking a clear effort. "So sorry. You were right about all of it." "We can talk about that when you are stronger," Clara said, her voice fierce. "Right now you need to rest." But Ethan's grip held tight, like he was scared she would walk away. "No, I need to say this now, in case I do not get another chance. You will get another chance. You are going to be fine. Please," he said, his eyes now clear and locked on her with a desperate fire. "I was so afraid of losing you that I just pushed you away. I kept my walls up and made choices by myself, all the things I swore I would not do." "I know," she said softly. "And tonight, when I thought I was dying out there, all I could think about was how stupid I had been. How I let fear steal the time we could have had together." His voice grew stronger with urgency. "I nearly died, Clara. And my last thought was that I had failed you. I failed to be the partner you need. I failed to choose you over my own fear." "But you survived," Clara said, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You are here. You are alive. And we get another chance. I do not deserve one." "That is not your decision to make," Clara's voice was firm. "I am choosing to give you another chance, and I am choosing to forgive you, but Ethan, this is the last time. If we get through this, you have to be all in. No more walls, no more running." "I know," Ethan said, his own eyes shining with tears. "I know. And I will. I promise. I will spend the rest of my life proving that I choose you, that I trust you, and that I am not afraid anymore." "You do not have to stop being afraid," Clara told him, repeating her own words from months before. "You just have to be afraid and choose me anyway." "I do," Ethan said. "I choose you today, tomorrow, and every day I have left. I choose you, Clara. Always." She leaned down and gave him a gentle, careful kiss. When she pulled back, they were both crying. "Rest now," she said. "Get strong. And when you are well, we are going to have a long talk about making sure this never happens again." "Looking forward to it," he said, and he actually smiled. He slept then, a real sleep, and Clara finally let herself believe he was going to make it. She stayed right there, holding his hand, choosing to forgive, because that is what love was. Choosing each other when things were hard, not just when they were easy. Ethan had almost died to avoid his fear, but in surviving he had finally learned the lesson. Love was not the danger. Fear was. And the only cure for fear was the courage to love anyway. It would take time for him to heal, but Clara would be there for all of it. She had chosen Ethan Hale, a man who was stubborn and scared and learning how to love. That was what partnership meant, and Clara had enough strength for the both of them, at least until Ethan found his own again. His recovery was slow. For a man who built his life on being strong and self-reliant, being stuck in bed for a week was a special kind of misery. Worst of all, he had to depend on Clara for everything. She took care of him, but the warmth between them was gone. He could feel her anger simmering just beneath the surface, held back only because he was still weak. On the fifth day, when he was strong enough to sit up on his own, she finally said what had been building inside her. "We need to talk," she said, putting his breakfast tray down a little too hard. "I know," Ethan said quietly. She sat in the chair next to the bed, her hands clenched in her lap. "You almost died, Ethan. You almost left me a widow after only 6 months because you were too proud or too scared to listen to me." "I know," he said again. "Do you?" Her voice cracked with pain. "Do you really understand what that was like for me? Searching in the dark, knowing every single minute could be the difference between finding you alive or finding you dead? Do you understand that I had to hold you just to keep you warm while I waited for help, praying I would not lose you?" Tears were streaming down her face now, and Ethan felt his own throat get tight. "I am so sorry, Clara." "I do not want your apologies," she cut him off. "I want to understand why. Why you would risk everything we have for cattle that could have waited. Why would you rather die alone in the snow than admit you need me?" The questions hung in the air, demanding a real answer. Ethan took a long, aching breath. "Because I was terrified," he said at last. "Because every day I wake up next to you, I realize how much I love you, how much I need you. And I learned a long time ago that the only way to survive losing someone is to never let them get close in the first place." "But I'm not leaving," Clara said, her voice breaking. "I know that in my head," Ethan touched his forehead. "And even in my heart," he touched his chest. "But there is a part of me that is still that kid whose mother died and whose father just gave up. That kid learned that depending on people only leads to pain. When that fear gets too strong, I pull away. I do stupid, reckless things to feel like I am in control, like I do not need anyone. Even if those things kill you," she said softly. "I was not thinking that far ahead," Ethan admitted. "I was just thinking about the work, about being the tough rancher, model, who has to do it all by himself. I wouldn't have to admit how scared I am of losing you." Clara was quiet, wiping away tears. "That's the most honest thing you have ever said to me. It's the truth." Ethan reached for her hand, and she let him take it. "Clara, I nearly died out there. My last thought was about all the time I'd wasted being scared. Time I should have spent loving you right. I was so worried about some pain in the future. I was causing a real one for us right now, and that was worse." "So what is different now?" Clara asked. "I finally get it," he said. "The one thing I was scared of, losing you, is exactly what I was making happen by pushing you away. My own fear was killing us. I don't want to live like that anymore, Clara. I want to love you, trust you, and build a life with you, not just protect myself from you." Clara looked at him for a long time. "You scared me half to death," she whispered. "When I thought I'd lost you, I realized it was silly to be mad at you for being afraid. We are both scared, Ethan. I am scared every day that I am not enough, that you will realize you married a city woman who doesn't belong. But I choose you anyway. That is what I need from you. I just need you to choose me, even with the fear." "I do choose you," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I will choose you every single day. And when I start pulling back like I do, you call me on it. Do not let me hide behind my work or my pride. Make me face it. Make me choose you over being scared." "I can do that," Clara said. "But you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise you will value your life as much as I do. No more foolish risks to prove you are tough. Promise you will listen when I am worried about you. I can live with fear, Ethan. I just cannot live wondering if every time you ride out is the last time I will ever see you." "I promise," Ethan said right away. "No more stupid risks. No more putting this ranch ahead of my own safety. From now on, we make big decisions together." Clara nodded, and the tightness in her shoulders finally eased. "We will get through this," she said, leaning in to kiss him. It was a kiss full of hope and relief. In the weeks that followed, Ethan worked hard to be the partner Clara deserved. He did it with small things, not big shows. He asked for her thoughts on everything. He shared his worries instead of burying them. It was not easy. His first instinct was always to handle things alone. But then he would remember lying in the snow, filled with regret, and he would choose to stay close to her instead. Clara saw the change. She trusted him more and started sharing her own fears about not fitting in or feeling lonely on the ranch. Spring came late that year. When the snow finally melted, Ethan and Clara walked their land together. They had lost fewer cattle than they feared, thanks to the preparations Clara had pushed for. The ranch had held up well, and the new calves were strong. "We ought to expand," Clara said, looking at the east pasture. "We could run another 50 head out there if we fenced it and got some water to it." "That is a big idea," Ethan said with a smile. "I like it. But we would need to hire more men." "We can afford it," Clara said, showing him her little book of numbers. "The money we saved from the new security measures will pay for it. If we are smart, we could double our herd in 2 years." They spent an hour making plans, each of them adding ideas, building something that was theirs together. This was the kind of partnership Ethan had never thought was possible. When they walked back, Ethan stopped and looked out over the land. "I used to think this ranch was everything," he said softly. "I thought if I could just make it work on my own, it would prove I was strong. And now?" Clara asked. "Now I see the ranch was just an excuse. The truth is, I was lonely. I was just trying to convince myself that being alone was the same as being strong." He turned to her. "You changed all that, Clara. You showed me that needing someone is not weakness. You showed me that love is the bravest choice of all." "You changed me too," she said. "I came here thinking I had to prove I could make it on my own. But you taught me that building a life with someone is stronger than standing alone." "We are quite a pair," Ethan said with a small smile. "Two folks scared of getting close who somehow found each other anyway." "The best things are forged in fire," Clara said. "We had ours, and we made it through." That night, with Clara beside him, Ethan thought about how far they had come. 6 months ago, a judge had told him to get married or lose his land. He saw Clara as just a solution to a legal problem, but she had become his whole world. She was the one who saw past his walls. She was the one who had saved his life in every way that counted. "Clara," he whispered. She murmured, half asleep. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For seeing something in me that I was too scared to see myself." She propped herself up and looked at him. "You saved my life, too. I was so lost when I came here. You gave me a home. You gave me a home and a partnership. You made me believe I could be more than what folks back east said I was." "We saved each other," Ethan said quietly. "We did," Clara agreed, "and we will keep on doing it." In the months that followed, Iron Creek Ranch had its best years ever. With Clara running the business side and Ethan handling the hard labor, they made a perfect team. They expanded slow and steady, adding land and livestock. Before long, the ranch had 8 full-time hands and a herd of over 400 head. They even added on to the main house because Clara was pregnant, and they were just getting started on building their family. The news filled Ethan with a powerful joy, but also a deep fear. To love another person was to risk losing them. "You are going to be a wonderful father," Clara told him one evening on the porch. "How can you know that?" he asked. "I do not know the first thing about it. My own father was just a lesson in what not to do." "You know how to love," she said simply. "You know how to work hard and how to admit when you are wrong. That is all that matters." He placed his hand over hers on her belly, feeling the life they had made. "I am still scared," he admitted. "Me too," she said. "But we are scared together." Their daughter, Sarah, arrived in the spring. She had her mother's gray-green eyes and her father's dark hair. The moment he held that tiny girl, something inside him broke open for good. She needed all of him, with no walls and no holding back. And he gave it all gladly. A son, James, followed 2 years later, and then twin girls, Emma and Grace, 3 years after that. The ranch house grew right alongside them, its quiet halls now filled with laughter. Fatherhood was the hardest and best thing Ethan had ever done. Every scraped knee brought back that old fear of loss, but Clara was always his steady hand. She reminded him that love meant knowing when to hold on and when to let go. He taught the children about the land, and she taught them about books and ideas. Together, they raised children who were both tough and kind. One evening, 15 years after that wedding they were pushed into, Ethan stood on the porch watching his family. Sarah, now 14, was helping her 12-year-old brother James. The 9-year-old twins were chasing each other through the garden. Clara came out and slid her arm around him. Her hair had streaks of gray, and her face showed the years of sun and laughter. To him, she was more beautiful at 41 than she had been at 26. "What is on your mind?" she asked. "I was just thinking about how wrong I was," Ethan said. "About everything. I used to believe that being strong meant being alone, that letting anyone in was a weakness. I figured love was the biggest risk a man could take." He held her tighter. "I was so wrong. I was so focused on saving my land that I never realized the land wasn't what needed saving at all." "What needed saving?" Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. "My heart," Ethan said, plain and simple. "My ability to love, to trust, and to believe that something good could actually last." He looked at her. "You saved all of that, Clara. You walked right into my fortress and talked me into tearing down my own walls. You showed me that the very thing I was scared of, dependent on someone, was the only thing that made life worth living." Clara rested her head on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "You saved me too. Remember? I was so angry, so dead set on proving I didn't need anybody. You taught me that being partners doesn't mean giving up who you are. It means choosing to share your strength instead of carrying the whole world on your own shoulders." They watched their kids play as the sun went down over the ranch, which had grown from 600 acres to over 2,000. The Iron Creek Ranch was a success by any standard, but its true worth wasn't in cattle or land. It was measured in the family it held up, the love that filled every corner, and in children who knew they were loved. Ethan finally asked the question he had held back for 15 years. "Do you ever regret it? Come in here?" Clara turned to him, her eyes soft. "Not once. Not for a single moment. This life, this family, you. It's everything I never knew I wanted. Everything I was afraid to even hope for." She squeezed his hand. "Especially during the hard times, the storms and the losses. Those are the moments that prove what we have is real. Any couple can get along when things are easy. We proved we could get through the impossible and come out stronger on the other side." Ethan kissed her. A long, deep kiss filled with 15 years of learning to love without fear. When they finally came up for air, their daughter Sarah was watching them with that look teenagers give their parents. "Y'all are so embarrassing," she called out. "Good," Ethan called back with a grin. "It's our job." Their children's laughter floated across the yard, and Clara smiled. "We did good," she said, softly. "Look what we built from a marriage we were forced into." "We built everything," Ethan agreed. "More than a ranch, more than a family. We built proof that love is a whole lot stronger than fear, and choosing each other every single day can change your whole world." As the sky grew dark, Ethan took one last look at the land that had once been his whole life. It was still beautiful, still the product of his sweat and hard work. But it wasn't what mattered most anymore. What mattered was the woman standing next to him, the children whose laughter was a testament to their love, and the partnership that started as a legal contract but had become the strongest foundation a man could ask for. That judge had given him a choice: get married or lose his ranch. He got married to save the land. But in the end, it was his own heart he saved. It was his future, his family, and every good thing that came from risking his heart. And the biggest surprise of all was that the woman the law forced into his life became the person he chose freely every single day. Clara Whitfield had shown up on his porch as an unwanted solution to a problem he hated. And somehow, she walked away with his whole heart. She saved him from a lonely life, a life lived protecting things instead of having a real purpose. She gave him a family, and she gave him joy. In return, he gave her a home, a purpose, and the knowledge that she was valued for exactly who she was. Together, they built something that would last long after they were gone. Not just the ranch their children would inherit, but the example they set. An example that showed what a marriage could be when two people were brave enough to face their fears side by side. That was the real legacy of the Iron Creek Ranch, not the land or the cattle. It was the proof that love beats fear, partnership is better than pride, and sometimes the best things in life come from accepting help you never knew you needed from a person you didn't know you were waiting for. Ethan Hale fought to protect his land and ended up saving his own heart. Clara Whitfield came looking for independence and found the greatest partnership she could imagine. They both learned that the very thing they were most afraid of, needing someone, was the one thing that made them truly strong. That was the truth that saw them through 15 years of marriage and would see them through 50 more. That was the bedrock of everything they built and everything they would become. And that's how a forced marriage became the truest love story the Arizona Territory had ever seen. Not because it was perfect, but because two stubborn, scared people chose to be brave enough to love each other anyway. It was the end of their rough beginning, and the start of everything that truly mattered. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.